January 26, 1997, a day that lives in infamy in Patriots Nation, as the New England Patriots traveled to a familiar sight as far as Super Bowls would be, Super Bowl 31, to take on the Green Bay Packers, a game that was within reach. Why they still kicked off to Desmond Howard, many of us may never know. However, perhaps if their head coach had not been too busy making over 50 telephone calls to Hempstead, New York, and the New York Jets the previous week as he was preparing for his departure, maybe, just maybe, it would not have taken another 5 years for the Patriots to go back to New Orleans and finally win their first Super Bowl. Yes, it was Dwayne Charles, Bill Parcells, in his fourth and final year as HC of the NEP, who led the Patriots on a miraculous run in the fourth year with his quarterback, Drew Bledsoe, to the Super Bowl, unfortunately, once again, losing in the Bayou down in the Crescent City. That week also was marked by, in addition to the frustration of Patriots Nation and the leaks of the stories and the phone calls and Bill Parcells being 1 foot out the door, truly one of the most curious press conferences with now one of the most famous lines in Patriots history.
Okay, now I'm going to quote, and I'm not trying to be cute here, okay? I'm just going to say it. They want you to cook the dinner. At least they ought to let you shop for some of the groceries. Okay?
First of all, if you look at Bill and I think we don't lack for adequate groceries. I mean, I think, and, you know, I think we've been shopping at Bread and Circus. I mean, I think our groceries are pretty good. They're fresh, you know. I mean, I like the groceries. I'd like to be flooded with groceries like that next year.
That whatever way a man chooses to run his company is fine with me. I abide by that. I abide by that, and I abide by the commissioner's ruling. So I have no problem with any of that. I'm out.
Shout out to the great Bread and Circus supermarket, someplace that many of our younger viewers and audience may be unfamiliar with. But yes, it was the decision earlier in the year to draft wide receiver Terry Glenn as opposed to defensive end Tony Brackens that hastened the departure of, up to the moment at that time, the best Patriots head coach of all time, Bill Parcells, who had turned down a job in Tampa a year prior to take over with the New England Patriots. Now, we can't say that Bill Parcells leaving the Patriots was a bad thing, ultimately, because we probably never get to Bill Parcells the way that we did, or would we? Which, of course, began the double dynastic run. So on today's episode of What If Wednesday here on the Six Rings and Football Things podcast, brought to you by WEEI, Odyssey, and 2400 Sports, your old pal, Nick Fitzy Stevens, alongside today's special holiday guests, Dave Usher and Scott Prusak from the Untold Patriots Stories podcast, we offer this question to you, Pats Nation. What if Bill Parcells were able to shop for the groceries and remained as the head coach of the New England Patriots? Gentlemen, good morning. Happy July 3rd to you as well. We appreciate you joining us in place of Andy Hart. Looks like there was a BOGO on guys that are Pat's long-terms and diehards. So welcome to your first Six Rings. This is long overdue, guys. We're thrilled to have you today. Let's just put the first thing out there. When I mentioned the Bill, before we get into the what if aspect of this, Dave, we'll start with you. When I mentioned Bill Parcells, someone who now sadly is almost villainized in Patriots Nation as opposed to lionized as he should have been for helping lead the Patriots, or at least beginning the emergence from the coal mine out of the darkness to what ultimately was the double dynasty. When I mentioned Bill Parcells' name, what do you think?
You know, I think of fun smash mouth football. That's really, I mean, I can't separate the two. I mean, the differences between the press conferences, really, I know people in our industry, it was a big deal. But then also, you know, if you grew up around here, lifelong Pats fans like we were, you watched Bill Parcells at the Giants, right? Because the Pats are so bad that they weren't on TV most of the time. So you grew up watching smash mouth football, O.J. Anderson, you know, LT.
Yeah, actually, Dave, that's a great point. And thank you very much to everyone who's watching live across the Fitzy GFY and WEEI socials as we also record this the day before America's birthday. Jesse Ebner watching live on YouTube. Parcells, he screwed us out of a Super Bowl. See, that's the first thing whenever anyone, that's what happens now when you mention him. But that's a great point, Dave, because my old shticky line was, yeah, the Patriots, the Pats were just like their fans back in the 1980s, always blacked out. Uh, Parcells began the emergence for us, but we were ultimately familiar with him. I don't know if you guys had. This seems like heresy now, but we sort of had alternate teams in my household growing up because, like, either the Patriots sucked, they were super shitty more often than not, or they weren't even on TV. So you would see Redskins games, Cowboys games, Raiders games, Niners games, and Giants games, and you were very familiar with Bill Parcells' style of football before he became the coach here. So much so that the Giants were my younger brother's favorite alternate team. Like, he just loved Otis Anderson, Phil Simms, Lawrence Taylor, Dave Meggett shall not be named. So he loved those guys. So we had a profound appreciation in New England for Bill Parcells before ultimately we were stunned that he actually wanted to come here for Robert Kraft and coach the team.
Right. Yeah,
Scott?
no, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I think of Bill Parcells, I really think of him as being the one that started the turnaround and brought respectability to the Patriots. And you also think of him, and you think of the 4 years he was here, and you also have to think of great drafts. I mean, he drafted 2 Hall of Famers, right? As far as that, I mean, if you look at his track record with drafts, I think you can't argue with that. And that's what started to build the teams that would eventually become successful. And I think, like you said in the beginning, I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did accomplish here, starting to turn that around, because he put us on the map again. I mean, we weren't relevant. And, I think one of the funny, when you look at his regular season record, and it kind of surprised me, he was actually 500, right? 32 and 32.
5-11 in 1993, 10
Yep.
and 6 in 1994. Ultimately, the first playoff game that Parcells has with Bledsoe and the Pats, losing in Cleveland to, ironically enough, Bill Parcells on New Year's Day. And then they go 11-5 in 96. So what was their record in 95? What was the
Six
Patriots?
and 10. So he ended up regular season, even, right?
Right. Okay.
So like I said, I just think he was responsible for a lot of the benefits and on the Super Bowls that we eventually saw. And the question that you kind of brought up is, if he was able to draft, because we all know the stuff that happened at drafts.
Yeah. Yep.
If he was able to draft, could he have sustained what happened when Belichick? I mean, obviously we had Pete Carroll in the middle, but would he have been able to build the kind of dynasty that Belichick built?
That's a great question. So if Parcells also, by the way, one of the commenters, Jesse Ebner, says Parcells came with Orthwine. I think, is that correct?
That might be true. I'd have to look
I
that
think
up.
he got him and then Kraft. That's sort of like the devil's in the details, one of those points. But any which way, the Kraft Parcells relationship was highly productive and then ultimately dysfunctional. And then we saw it play out to a grander degree 2.5 decades later with Belichick and Kraft as well. And we're not really sure if grocery shopping was at the core of some of their late term frustrations as well. But if Bill Parcells never left and was allowed to shop for all the groceries, then it would not have been Terry Glenn in 1996. It would have been Tony Brackens.
Right.
Now, obviously, he crushed most of his drafts. And like you mentioned, drafted a couple Hall of Famers and some of the tent poles and pillars of what ultimately became Bill Belichick's dynasty, or at least the start of it, fueled by Tom Brady and a couple of great additions in 2000 and 2001, were your Teddy Bruschi's, your Adam Vinatieri's, your Ty Laws, et cetera. Like, there were some, Dave, there were some foundational pieces that Bill Parcells drafted that, again, like Scott mentioned, he doesn't get nearly enough credit for. And I think that's kind of one of the, to date, still one of the great argumentative topics of Pat's Nation is, should Parcells be in the Hall of Fame because of just, regardless of how it ended, just for how impactful he was during those 4 years?
Well, this is really Scott's flagpole to run up, but I've talked to him enough to know the answer to this is absolutely, and I agree. I mean, there's some bad blood there, and it's, we all believe it's because RKK doesn't want him in. But if you looked at on what he did to turn this franchise around and bring them to respectability, I think he absolutely deserves to be in there. And, you could also argue that Bill Belichick is from that coaching tree. So without Parcells, is there a Bill Belichick? So, that's a big piece of it as well. And I just think that, he does not get enough credit. He did exit poorly, may have cost us a Super Bowl. But had he been able to continue, I think we could have had a Super Bowl. Don't know if we would have had 6, but we can get into that. But I think he was bringing us to the promised land.
Yeah. So Scott, with Pete Carroll goes 10-6, 9-7, 8-8. Had a winning record as a head coach. So what did he go? And then he had the 2 playoff appearances. Wins 1 game in 97,
Yep.
loses in 98 with Zolak. 99 missed the playoffs.
He was 27-21.
Right, and he got fired for that, obviously. But I think it was mostly because of the direction that Kraft and everyone in charge saw the team heading in, as opposed to what actually Pete Carroll's record was. But let's say Parcells. So let's just say he gets to what happens in the 1996 season. If there's no Terry Glenn, who was incredibly impactful and had one of the best rookie wide receiver seasons. I mean, if Javon Baker or Jalen Polk has 2/3 of a Terry Glenn season this year, we'll be praising Elliott Wolf and saying, build a 12-foot statue of him next to Tom Brady out in the promenade outside Gillette Stadium. So let's say he gets Tony Brackens or someone else, and he gets to fully shop for the groceries. Do the Patriots even make a Super Bowl run in 1996? Forget about if they win a Super Bowl ultimately with Parcells. Do they even make a Super Bowl run in 1996 if Belichick is given full draft autonomy? Parcells, rather.
Yeah, I think if you take Terry Glenn out of the equation, I think one of the strong points of Parcells was building a team. So I don't know necessarily in Terry Glenn's first year if he wasn't with the team, they wouldn't have got as far as they did. I think Parcells would have found a way to get all the parts to work together and still have a successful season. I mean, maybe they don't reach the Super Bowl, but I think they definitely would have made the playoffs. Just by Terry Glenn alone, I don't think that's the one reason that they made it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, Terry Glenn wasn't the. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, if I can add to that, I agree. Glenn became a good pick. However, if they had taken Brackens, the intent was to put him alongside Willie McGinnis, and Willie McGinnis was coming off his best and really at that time, but also his career season. He had 88 tackles, 11 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. I mean, that was the point. As we look at what if Bill Parcells kept going, one of the first things I thought of was Willie McGinnis is in the Hall of Fame, because I think he builds it up and he makes him that much of a better player. You look at the numbers while he was injured during the Carroll years. He probably played 14 less in 3 years there, but they weren't really comparable. He just didn't do it for Pete for whatever reasons. Where I think Bill would have motivated him the whole way and brought in the pieces around him, and he was going to be his LT.
Yeah, it's funny. If you think about it, like Bledsoe, as some of the commenters are mentioning now, Bledsoe lacked a true wide receiver one. And my God, how long have we talked about, Pats need a deep threat. Mac Jones needs wide receiver one. They're going into the season with a bunch of wide receiver twos. Brady, look what Tom Brady did during the seasons where he had a true, we'll just call it weapon one or target one, with Moss and a Welker. And obviously Gronk, who was, not just a tight end, but truly one of the great offensive threats of all time in the NFL. He flourished, and there always was something that had to be respected, and it opened the entire game up. So with Brackens, if he comes in, Willie McGinnis maybe becomes a Hall of Famer. Now you've got these, bookend pass rushing monsters. The edges are constantly set in the Patriots defense in 1996, which ultimately got them to the Super Bowl, by the way. Glenn contributed against Pittsburgh with that bomb on the opener, but then it was ultimately the defense that shut down the Jags in the AFC Championship. And, everyone remembers where they were when Otis My Man Smith recovered the fumble and took it 50 some odd yards back to the house. I think that was like the first ever snow fireworks that erupted in Foxboro too. Such a great moment. He had Ben Coates as well, but that wide receiver one really opened up the offense for the Patriots that season as well. So maybe they make it back to the playoffs. I don't know if they go all the way to the Super Bowl, because Glenn had 167 targets that year, 90 catches. I don't know if that's a testament to, how well covered Glenn was at times, or Bledsoe's inaccuracy that he still had 90 catches, but was targeted almost twice as many times. Like, he was a massive contributor. But all right, so without him, they don't have, the offense isn't the same, but maybe they do have a stellar defense. So they go to the playoffs, we'll say, in 1996. Maybe they make it to the divisional round, maybe even to the AFC Championship with a Giants-esque defense that Belichick can just do all these wonderful things with for Parcells. So he sticks around. Now it's 1997. That was the year Carroll got one win out of him, and then they ultimately lose later on to Pittsburgh in the playoffs. What happens going forward? Let's take a peek. So let's imagine they go to the playoffs. They don't go to the Super Bowl. They don't go to Super Bowl 31, and Brett Favre gets to celebrate at someone else's expense. What do we think, Scott? I'll start with you. What do you think happens in 1997?
I think, and then we're assuming that Parcells is drafting that team, right? That he's doing the draft. So I think he probably has a strong draft, and I think what he built upon with the people already he brought to the team. I think again, I mean, they were 10-6 in 97, 10-6 in 97 with Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you're talking another deep playoff run. I think, and I just want to backtrack for 1 second to what Dave was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think even without Glenn, I think Parcells was a defensive-minded coach. So I think minus Glenn, he would have made up for that somehow defensively. So I think by him drafting and him having another year, with the talent he's already assembling, I think they could have had a more successful season. I mean, maybe give them, is he worth another 2 or 3 wins, with another good draft, and building the defense, over Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd say at least 2, maybe 3, right? And then I think a deeper playoff run, because I think he would have continued to keep building that defense, and it would have become a monster.
So they would have maybe had a monstrous defense and a more New York Giants-esque offense, we'll say. Let's take a look at, all right, immediately, this is kind of fun. Let's look at so let's say the Patriots, who ultimately picked 29th and took Pete Carroll's first pick with Bobby Greer, I believe, was the infamous Chris Canty. Cornerback Chris Canty out of Kansas State, who is the owner of one of my favorite lines of all time. When he was released from the Patriots, I don't know if you guys remember, he was like asleep in his car, and he had an adult beverage in his hand, if you will. And whoever wrote this, I'm not sure who it was, if it was Cafardo, Shaughnessy, or somebody. This is one of the great lines of all time. The New England Patriots, this is from memory. The New England Patriots released cornerback Chris Canty today, who was found asleep in his car with a beer can, much like every receiver he tried to cover in the NFL, wide open.
Wow. Yeah, that's an
that was a sick burn alert.
That's a severe burn right there.
All right, so they don't pick 29th in 1997. Maybe they pick in the mid-20s. I'm going to read you. I'm curious who we think may have been selected here. So we'll start with pick 20 by the Minnesota Vikings. That was Dwayne Rudd, linebacker out of Alabama. The Jags at 21 took Ronaldo Wynn, D tackle out of Notre Dame. Cowboys went with David LaFleur, tight end out of LSU. The Bills took soon-to-be 2-time Super Bowl champion running back Antoine Smith. Curtis Martin, by the way, still with the Patriots in 1997 because he stays with Parcells. Parcells doesn't go to the Jets that year. So the Jets remain in turmoil. 24, Chad Scott, cornerback out of Maryland. 25, Eagles, John Harris, DE, Virginia. 49ers took Jim Druckenmiller. Oh, my God.
What a name.
There you go.
And let's hope, exactly. Unbelievable name. And let's hope that the Patriots, maybe if they were picking somewhere between 24 and 28, let's hope at 27th overall, they don't take Carolina Panthers wide receiver Ray Caruth.
Yeah, that would have been
would have been bad.
It
might have been a
Canty was Druckenmiller in his car, right?
Well played, sir. All right. So, I mean, does Parcells, now we look to 97, how many more years do we think? So if he ends up having another defensive-minded draft and getting, journeyman wide receivers, maybe Troy Brown becomes a grander focal point of the offense as well. Maybe there's, the legend of Ben Coates potentially grows further. Maybe Dave, you posited that maybe the first thing is William McGinnis if Parcells sticks around another let's say 1 to 4 years. Let's say he's there as long as Carroll was, and then ultimately Belichick were to take over, because we know Parcells was mercurial and fickle and capricious and always did what he wanted to do. Just like the big smug smile, like let them run the business they want. I'm out. Okay. God, that's one of the many reasons why he's still not in the Pats Hall of Fame, whether it's bad blood with him and Kraft or not. But let's say he sticks around 3 more years. Maybe he does make it to a Super Bowl. You say that McGinnis becomes a Hall of Famer. Terry Glenn obviously never plays for the Patriots. Who else benefits intensely from the Bill Parcells era, player-wise?
Well, you mentioned Coates. I mean, he was a beast,
Coach.
right? And that was Bledsoe's binky. So, Bledsoe's playing longer, and that's going to be very successful between the two of them. Curtis Martin never leaves, right? So Curtis Martin, Hall of Fame running back, he left as soon as Parcells took the job with the Jets. So he stays here. He wanted to play with Bill. So that's so
he's definitely, at least he's got a red jacket to add to his Hall of Fame resume as well.
Right. And you have a back like that, you don't have to necessarily have top end receivers. They make some of those other guys better.
Right, because did Robert Edwards, was he the lead back in 97?
I believe so, yeah, because that was
right.
I think Carroll picked him. I believe.
Yeah, I think Robert Robert Edwards, his pro career, he came into University of Georgia.
Pro career, not his career in the same.
Oh God! I mean, every time Tully Banta Kane runs, chosen by the New England Patriots in the first round of the 1998 draft. So then 1997 they didn't have. So it was 98 that he was RB1 for the Patriots. So they dipped early in on him. Who the hell was geez, talk about all these little things. Who was RB1 for the Patriots in 1997? That's a great one. I think I actually stumped the guys that I think know more about the Patriots than anyone. What's that?
Give me
was that Marion Butts time?
Was that Butts time? May have been.
Not Booty. Not Booty, God. Butts.
I'm looking down here. Boy, the NFL doesn't have this laid out very well at all. Who the hell was that? So that's a great one.
So 97 was still Martin with Keith Byers as the fullback.
And Curtis Martin did play 1 more year. Okay, and then he left after 97. That's what it was. Okay, I was going to say because I didn't think that was Butts' time. No, Curtis Martin was still the running back. He left after the 97 season. And because in 97, Parcells, remember, there was the whole slap and tickle with, I'm not going to. Yep, thank you very much, Mary Beth Ballon. Thank you. Appreciate you guys chiming in. Curtis Martin, it was indeed. Because the Pats went 10-6. You still had Glenn, you had Coates, you had Curtis Martin. They win 1 playoff game the first year with Pete Carroll. It's once Curtis Martin leaves on that 6-year, $36 million deal with the poison pill in it, preventing the Patriots from matching the offer. That really began the decline. Like the Pete Carroll offense becomes much more one-dimensional that year. Bledsoe gets hurt. We get the famous Zolak against the Jags game in the playoffs as well. Whereas the Jets, who tried to do, remember they tried to do that whole thing where they named Belichick like interim or temporary placeholder coach, and wasn't Parcells like was he a special advisor at first?
Yeah, they bumped him up to the office to kind of create all this stuff, and that's when Belichick wrote the message on the napkin.
Right. And so then Belichick is the defensive coordinator for a while for the Jets. So the Patriots immediately, when Parcells leaves, have a massive brain drain all over the team. And the Jets struggle in 1997, but it's in 1998. Curtis Martin comes over, and then, Parcells' second year, they're in the AFC Championship, and the Patriots are already on the downturn. So we saw what a massive swing that was. So Parcells, let's say, like we said, he sticks around for 3 full seasons. Are there any other players? We said Coates, Curtis Martin, Willie McGinnis. I mean, Ty Law is going to continue to just be a monster on the outside. I mean, he's already a Hall of Famer and he's a Patriots legend. Could he have benefited anymore? Does anyone else? Does Teddy Bruschi flourish? Anyone on the line? Are there any other players we could have seen come to the Patriots that would have led to some other growing Foxboro legends that you guys could think of?
Well, they already had that happen between like Bobby Hamilton and AP Anthony Pleasant and Otis Smith and some of these guys. They were all Parcells disciples that came over anyway.
Yep. Yeah, and some of them stuck around, obviously. And those are some of the guys who, in 2001, Belichick brought a bunch of those guys back around 2000 or 2001, especially, right? And so those are some of some of the unsung heroes of Super Bowl 36 and that incredible, everyone always thinks, 2001 is all because of Tom Brady. Like,
it really wasn't.
No.
That was a defensive championship.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but that was a team that, and I think we talked about this on one of our podcasts. It was a team that was kind of brought together by, I think, what was a very balanced mix of veterans and then some of the younger players that were coming up. I mean, we talked about like Otis Smith, all those guys. So I think that was the talent of that team that won that Super Bowl. But I have a question. I have a question I want to throw out, Fitzy, as we're talking about this whole what if. What if we know Kraft had issues with Belichick, but he gave him more of a free reign, right?
For quite a long time, because no matter how much Belichick spent on those groceries, and he was thrifty more often than not, the results spoke for themselves for sure.
So what if you flipped Belichick with Parcells? If Kraft was the owner he was with Belichick, if he was that way with Parcells, would that have led to a longer tenure and continued success?
So your question is, if Kraft was more like he was with Parcells, if he was more like how he was with Belichick with Parcells, would that have led to more success?
Yeah, because in the beginning he wanted control of everything, and he kind of he kind of realized the mistakes after. So would it have been a totally different scenario if Parcells had the craft that Belichick had?
I think so, and I think the only downside I can think to all of that, yes, they would have definitely had more success. I think they would have made it ultimately back to at least one Super Bowl. If Parcells, let's say he stays 3, maybe 4 seasons, do we think that there's an immediate succession plan right afterwards? So what if Bill Parcells does stay and he stays 3-4 seasons? Yes, they do have more success. Robert Kraft does learn to stay hands off, and he finds his successor, who he didn't go with in 1997 because he thought it was too soon. Brings in Pete Carroll, rights that wrong, trades for Parcells, and gives up draft equity that he should have given up 20 first-round draft picks. Belichick was worth all of it. Do we think Belichick takes over in the same year, 2000? Is it 2001, perhaps, that he takes over and starts his run?
Yeah.
Well, it would make sense because his longest tenure with any team was 8 years, Parcells, and the average of his 4 teams is 4.75 years. So he's not his entire Hall of Fame coaching career is 5 years shorter than Belichick's tenure in New England. So
Get
it
out of
shows
here.
you that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
No way. How long did he coach the Giants for? 8 years?
8 years. And then he went
4 with the Pats.
And then he was 4 with the Cowboys.
4 with the Jets?
I think it was 5 with the Jets.
Yeah.
I'll find my notes right now. But
97, 98, 99, 2000. Wow. So so like 5 with the Jets. Yeah. So that leaves him almost a half dozen years short of how long Belichick coached, because Belichick was 4 with the Browns and 23 with the Pats, 24 with the Pats. God, he was here.
Yeah, 24.
Yeah.
Damn. Wow. So Bill Parcells, coach, all that people think of him as this legacy figure that must have been a head coach for like 30 straight seasons in the NFL. Turns out he actually.
He even had a
Good.
few years off in there, so he wasn't straight through. I
Right.
mean, yeah. So it was 8 with the Giants, 4 with the Pats, 3 with the Jets, and 4 with the Cowboys. But there was a break there before he took the Cowboys job too.
That's right. And that Cowboys team. When he goes to the Cowboys, you wonder where. So where does Parcells go? All right. Here's another. I love all the different wrinkles and like timeline iterations that come about when you just start to shake the foundation with one little what if. So let's say Parcells stays 3 more seasons, has this goes up 2,000. Belichick likely takes over for the Patriots then. Maybe things play out similarly, or maybe not, because maybe they don't draft Tom Brady at that point. And
Right.
so maybe the Patriots don't end up having the double dynastic run. So the best thing that happened, even though at the time it was highly dysfunctional and traumatizing for a lot of Pats fans, was Parcells leaving when he did. Where do we think, what happens to Parcells' coaching career? Let's say he just gets tired or just like, I'm ready to move on. What becomes of Parcells after he leaves the Patriots? Should he stick around 2 or 3 more seasons at the end of the 90s?
I think if he stayed around another 2 to 3 years and he had the success that we think he would, I mean, I think he could have probably have coached as long as he wanted to coach. He would have had a track record of good drafting, right? Building the team, taking it out from bringing it to respectability. So I think it might have actually worked more in his favor, because one of the criticisms about Parcells is he was year to year and he made decisions for Parcells. So I think if he had a longer tenure in New England and did bring them to respectability and did draft well, I think maybe the perception of him would have been changed around the NFL and maybe by owners. I mean, they all knew he was successful, but I think anybody that hired Parcells knew, and I think Dave made the point, it was going to be a short-term fix. He'd be around for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, and then that would be it. So maybe if he stayed here for a longer period of time, that would have built his reputation for building a winner and then making decisions that are good for the organization. And that's one of the things that Kraft said. He makes decisions for Bill Parcells, not necessarily for the long term.
And Parcells is obviously a Patriots Hall of Famer at that point. Maybe he does only go to one other team, and maybe he does end up with a better reputation as well. Dave, on Untold Patriots Stories, have you guys ever had anyone on the podcast that has ever told you any great Parcells stories or brought up some insight as to what it was like to play for him or be around the Patriots during that time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the good friends of our show, Maurice Hurst, him and Parcells really got along well, and they had some real fun
I
stories.
haven't heard. That's like Obi-Wan. I have not heard the name Maurice Hurst in many moons. Wow, Maurice Hurst. Wait a
Yep.
But we've
go
got
ahead.
and we've had guys like Skarnakia and Romeo on and such to talk about that, and sort of compare and contrast the two coaches. Same thing with Chad Eaton. He played for those guys, and
I
it
love the
was
Chad Eaton episodes. That guy is, and if you guys, I highly recommend everyone subscribe to Untold Patriots Stories because they connect. Didn't you guys just talk to John Smith most recently?
Yeah, and Mark
Yeah,
Henderson.
all about the snowplow game. Everything you wanted to know, all the mysteries revealed.
Just because
And
things are so good now in hindsight with all the Super Bowls and all the winning, it makes all the just dankest, most miserable, shitty times, all the 500 yards of Shawshank sludge that we used to wade through every season is now so much more enjoyable in hindsight because of how good we had it for so long. And again, we probably don't have it the exact same. Like, there's just no way the timeline couldn't have been altered even slightly. Like, it just doesn't play out the same way as it does from 2000 to 2020 unless Parcells does what he does. So actually, in hindsight, and of course, it's great to hear from all those guys as well. Like you say, Maurice Hurst, Chad Eaton, Romeo, Dante, who probably all love the way Parcells coached and his, like you said, who's it? Dave, was it you who said the first thing you think of it with Parcells is smash mouth, fundamental football 101? God, I hope that's what Gerard Mayo brings back, even in the slightest degree this season. But
Amen.
exactly, I know. But as Hart and I like to joke, like, well, it's going to be super collaborative, and there's no more silos. So everyone, just go help yourself to the giant pile of grain that's outside the stadium, because sometimes silos are a good thing.
Yeah.
Wait, are you our Heart Thunder?
Yeah. Well, there's actually, you have to take a lap now. We have a rule. You can't say Young Thunder on the podcast. That's $1 in the Young Thunder jar. By the way, have you guys
All right, I got
noticed?
you.
Have you guys noticed that ever since that introductory press conference, that phrase, that nickname has not been uttered once since?
Yeah, you think somebody might have said, no more
Yeah,
thunder?
yeah. Stacy probably came in. Hi, Gerard. We noticed our sensitivity ratings went off, and that actually got the lowest rating of anything anyone has ever said. So if we could just not repeat that again, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Good
that was
stuff.
brutal. So, all right. So you guys have had a chance to talk to some of them, and good stories, good parts. Like, have you ever you've gotten the sense on your podcast that there's like a profound appreciation, at least in terms of like a football guy and like as a coach and leader of men, for Parcells?
Absolutely.
Very well respected. And he had his guys, and he would take care of his guys. And I think that built a loyalty with him, because he did have a lot of players that he would take from team to team wherever he went. But yeah, definitely well respected. A lot of good things to say, and I think when people talk about Belichick, they're kind of they don't want to give up information because I guess, I don't know, Dave, if you agree with me on this, but it's almost a different kind of loyalty or respect with Parcells. I think
it's fear might be in there a little bit too. I don't know that they were necessarily afraid of Bill Parcells, and like Dante Scarnecchia wouldn't admit that Bill Belichick has a sense of humor. We all know he does, and we know that he's seen it, but he wouldn't even give a hint of it. We've heard other folks, tell us that he, to the guys he likes and behind the scenes, and he's actually quite a funny guy.
I love when the listeners start throwing in their own what ifs as well, because the timeline is totally shook at this point. Here's a good one. Patrick McNally watching live on Facebook right now. Would Parcells have put Drew back in 2001? Let's say Parcells were still coach and they had taken the players they had. I'm not even sure if we would have Brady, but do we think Parcells would have put Drew back in, and would we have never learned about Brady?
That's actually a really good question.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest. So go ahead, Scott.
I think with Parcells, that's a legitimate. I think that could have went either way, because I think Parcells is more of the old school. So I don't think Brady would have got the job as quickly as he did with Belichick with Parcells, because I think he would have felt the loyalty to Drew, especially drafting him too. You got to throw that in the equation.
It's his guy,
right? That's it. Totally his guy. All right, this is a great one. This becomes the ultimate variant on what if. Kenny Tasney also watching live right now on Facebook. Here's a good one. Does Tony Romo ever become a starter if Parcells doesn't go to Dallas? Parcells goes to Dallas, brings in Bledsoe. Bledsoe gets hurt, and boom, Romo comes in. So maybe, who knows? Romo owes his career in a lot of ways to Bledsoe and Parcells in that capacity as well. But does he ever? But if Parcells doesn't go to Dallas because he stays longer with the Patriots and ends up somewhere else, do we ever even see Jim?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good one.
Yeah. See, my question on this is, do we ever really see the real Bill Belichick? If he's still under that whole time as an assistant coach, and does he then become Josh McDaniels, bopping around, getting a job where he can't here, and then running back to Parcells if Parcells is still coaching? And then more importantly to that, does Bill ever get a 24-year-old girlfriend if he's not this successful?
is the Belichick. I think I ultimately think that the way Belichick treated his relationships, much like the same way Parcells treated his relationships with teams, probably would have played out. But it would have, who knows if he would have been with Linda, and I try not to get too deep into the weeds on that one because that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. I don't usually like talking about people date someone a third of their own age.
It's a whole nother podcast, right?
I mean, my God. I mean, he's dating someone that's not as old as N'Keal Harry, for Christ's sakes.
Way to put
All right, so
that in perspective, Fitzy.
all right, I'll cut that off and say, what about
Oh, please. It all lives. It's all good by me. He's not here anymore, so we're actually allowed to jest about that, although people still get too up in their Foxboro feels about that. All right, so in summation, as we look to wrap up a very fun edition here of Six Rings on What If Wednesday, what if Bill Parcells never left the Patriots? So we think that the Patriots ultimately still. All right, I'll end with this. Let's just go around the room. And if anyone who's watching live right now has an answer to this, please feel free to chip in as well. How many Super Bowls? Because a bunch of people that have been listening thus far have commented that the Patriots probably would not have 6 Super Bowls now because the timeline would have been altered so much. How many Super Bowls do we think the New England Patriots would have today had Bill Parcells stayed for another 2, 3, possibly 4 seasons with the Pats?
In 4 seasons, I'm going to say 1, potentially 2.
No, just from now, from 1997 to now, because the Belichick era would have invariably been different. We don't know if he would have gotten Tom Brady, if he would have punted on Bledsoe, taken a different quarterback. Hell, for all we know, Tony Rattay would have been. All right, here's our first answer. Viewer Pat McNally: Drew would have gotten 2 as Parcells would have kept him in. Okay, so he's got 2. What do you guys say?
I would comfortably say I definitely don't think 6 would have been attainable because again you got to take the whole Brady factor out. And I would say if you look at the Super Bowls, maybe half of them in the beginning were more structured towards defense and all that kind of stuff, whereas the last 3 were more on Brady's shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you take away the one in Green Bay, because if he didn't feel the way he did and didn't leave, he would have put more attention into that Super Bowl. So I would give him that one. So there's one right there.
Okay.
Right? And I would say 2 more. I would say he would have been good for at least half of what they achieved with Brady. So I would say 3.
Scott Duquette watching live right now. What up, Scott? I would say 3 overall if the D is what it was from 01 to 04. All right, so I kind of like that, Scott. I'll give 2 to Parcells. So he got 2 with the Giants. He was on his way, like you said earlier, Dave, with the Brackens pick to building a giant. Now, there was obviously no LT, but you did have you had some studs on that defense. Law, Brewski, McGinnis. You would have Brackens, maybe somebody else as well. So let's say they win. Parcells wins 2, wins that second one maybe in 99. They win in 97. I'm with you on that one, Scott. He's more focused. It's a better team effort. They upset Favre. They were ripe for the upsetting in that game too. As you know, even though the final score says 35-21, it was a closer game than the final score indicated. So 2 for Parcells and then maybe 1 for Belichick.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's what I was alluding to before. I agree with that. They're not going to get 6, unfortunately. And it's hard to say. Drew Bledsoe, I love him now, but back then we're forgetting the ball padding, the happy feet, the hook shot in the AFC Championship game.
Interceptions at the worst possible time.
And another one of the great lines, this one from Shaughnessy. Bledsoe, what did he say about Bledsoe after Parcells left, struggling in the ball padding and the happy feet during the Carroll era? Bledsoe, who commands the pocket like a giraffe on stilts.
That's a good one.
But I also think that Bill won with Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler. So he didn't necessarily need a Peyton Manning or Dan Marino to lead his team. So with the defense, because that's what he was mostly about, defense and smash mouth football, which he had with handing it off to Curtis Martin. They're still going to
I wonder if he brings in And by the time 97, 98, does he bring in, like, is there a Hostetler or someone he brings in to challenge Bledsoe in the late 90s as Parcells ends up finishing up his career with the Pats? I wonder
Yeah.
who that would have been.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your
Like
boy
what?
Drunkenmiller.
Who the? Yeah. your boy Drunken.
If there's anybody that's a poster child, Fitzy, Drunken Miller, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's that. I should get that custom jersey made yesterday. Yeah, that's why you know what IPA stands for in my world: intense patriot affection, not India Pale Ale.
There you go.
There you go. Right. All right. All right. Well, this is a fun one to throw around. If any of you guys are sitting around 4th of July cookouts, having some drinks by the fire pit, or just generally looking for something interesting to discuss Patriots wise, because we are 3 weeks out from the start of Pats Camp 2024. Maybe you've talked out the Wick Grossbeck selling of the Celtics. It's not time to dial in necessarily on the Red Sox yet, because you don't want to pot commit emotionally until you see whether or not Breslow and Henry and company commit to their own freaking team. Or maybe you're just like, yeah, I heard the Bruins signed some guys, but I have no idea who the F they are because it's hockey. Here's a free topic for you guys to throw around. Exactly. What if Parcells left? Did you see it gave us 45 minutes of great chatter here on the latest Six Rings and football things? Once again, I highly recommend that you guys follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcast to the Untold Patriots Stories podcast. These guys do a better job at treating Patriots alumni, Patriots legacies, Patriots villains, Patriots heroes, and beyond with the respect, the dignity, and the forum that they deserve as well. So Dave Usher, Scott Prusak, thank you guys very much for filling in today for Andy Hart. Any other plugs or information you guys want to squeeze in before we all wish everyone a happy birthday, America?
No, have a great 4th of July, and give our podcast a listen. It's a little different, but it's a lot of great information, a lot of great guests, and a lot of great stories. So give it a listen.
All right,
stuff you wouldn't have heard unless you listen to our podcast.
Exactly. How would you know exactly what the hell went on with John Smith and everything? Just the snowplow game alone. Subscribe. Tell you what, go for the snowplow game. Go back for the Chad Eaton. Wonder how the hell that animal was able to stay on the football field as long as he possibly did. I promise you guys will be hooked. And I like the fact that you say you do it a little bit differently, because you guys it's a storyteller's podcast. So there's not a lot of quick takes and, news flashes and whiz bang and sound effects. It's just a couple of people that are hooking into the people behind the stories here in Patriots Nation over all these decades. And I appreciate the way you guys go about business. So thanks again, guys. And make sure you guys follow and subscribe Untold Patriot Stories. All right, we'll be back at the end of the week. I'm going to be filling in for the Greg Hill Show Thursday and Friday with Chris Scheim. Scheim and I are going to break down one of those mornings, the Drake May over-unders and props that just came out, what we think is going to happen with the new QB1 of the NEP, and just exactly when we think he's going to get in there. So we'll have a new Six Rings at the end of the week. But until then, have a great holiday, everybody. America, you're only 248 years old. You may need a little work, but I think you look pretty damn good as far as I'm concerned. Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Six Rings and Football Things. Our thanks to Scott and Dave from Untold Patriot Stories. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good day. God bless. And as always, go